Hello, Anne. It's lovely to
Hi,
see you.
Shaista. Good to
How
see
are
you.
you?
Great.
Good, good. Well, we know each other anyway because
Yeah.
you are secretary at Oxford East. So let's just get straight into our conversation there. So, Anne, can you tell me why you're running for the NEC?
Well, that's a really good question. I was on the NEC for 18 years as part of the Centre-Left Grassroots Alliance. And when I lost in 2018, I kind of thought, well, that's it. I've done my stint. And at that time, I wasn't thinking of coming back. And a few things influenced me. I guess the party has changed. Uh, since the general election, up to 100,000 members left between 2017 and 2019. 100,000 joined after the general election. So it's like a new party. There seems to be a new mood of unity. And there's also something that women say, but men rarely do. And that's that I thought of running because people asked me to. And
Yeah.
I wondered at first whether it was a few friends, but I found out today that I got 301 nominations
Well, you've
from
got a lot of friends,
PLP.
Anne.
So hopefully I have enough friends when it gets to the ballot. And
Yeah.
I thought maybe I can contribute.
Well, that's really interesting because I think anybody who knows you, who's come across you, will say that they very much admire the fact that you dedicated your life to the Labour Party. You've worked tirelessly for the party under various leaders. I think the other thing about you, as someone who knows you, because as I said, you're the secretary of my local CLP, is whether people agree with you or not, they know you work very, very hard and you are someone who strives to be fair. So I'm very pleased that you're standing
Thank
again.
you.
And what I wanted to ask you is, what have you achieved on the NEC? I know there's a very long list, Anne, but what are your highlights, would you say?
Well, I think when I first came onto the NEC, I did start to make it more visible to members, more transparent, and that was in the days before Twitter, before everything was on social media, before the vote had happened in the room, and it was people really didn't like me reporting, but I always tried to do it in a very discreet way. Like I would try to tell people what was going on, but not in a way that made headlines in the Daily Mail and the Express.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a fine line, and I let people read between the lines, and a lot of people wrote to me, and I would tell them more privately.
Yeah.
So that's long term. There was constitutional changes. When I came on, members of the House of Lords could still stand in these seats. We had Lord Michael Cashman and Lord Tom Sawyer, and I worked with Tony Robinson, Baldrick, if you remember, and we cooperated and we got them out. I got one member, one vote for the National Policy Forum elections. It took me 10 years, but I persisted. And I guess the single thing that I'm pleased about was in 2010, the leadership election. I worked with Tony Lloyd, who was chair of the PLP, and we got Diane Abbott onto the ballot paper because I felt very strongly that it was not a good look to have 4 white men in their 40s in suits. We really needed diversity. So we ended up getting just enough nominations. David Miliband nominated her, and he was a candidate himself, to broaden the debate. And looking back, it's possible that that also led to Jeremy Corbyn, because the idea of nominating somebody to broaden the debate and then they don't get elected, of course. But by 2015, some of the people who nominated Jeremy Corbyn to broaden the debate were a bit taken aback by the result. But I think it did change things. I still think it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, well, it was the will of the membership. So yes, it was the right thing to do. And
Yeah.
what you're saying here really chimes with my time here at Oxford as an active member of the party. And you've very much, I've seen you be very supportive of people from different backgrounds. You have supported the BAME members' rights to define themselves and to self-organize as well, which I think happened 2 years ago, I think now, in our CLP. So I've seen you, tirelessly stand up for people's rights, and which is why when you asked me if I'd interview you, I was like, absolutely. So tell me, if people don't know you, if they kind of only come across you through maybe Googling you, Anne, or if they've heard things about you, because you are a very prolific member of the party and everyone doesn't, people who follow the Labour Party do know who you are. Why should people vote for you?
Well, first I'd say I'm accountable, and I also try to represent members. I do have strong principles of my own. I'm on the left. I would find it very hard to vote for replacing Trident. I would find it hard to vote against employment rights. I would actually find it hard to vote for the bill that's currently going through Parliament on not prosecuting people for war crimes, even torture and so on. So I have strong principles, but I also listen to members. I try very hard to consult them when votes are coming up, and then I report back on how I voted and why. And if I've got it wrong, they tell me, and I do it differently next time. So that's one thing. I'm loyal, and I've been on the NEC under Tony Blair when there were basically four of us. There was me, Christine Shawcroft, Dennis Skinner, and Mark Seddon. So we were a tiny little group voting against the war in Iraq and so on, all the way through Gordon Brown, Ed Miliband, and then Jeremy Corbyn. And I've always had disagreements with all leaders from time to time, but I will tell them privately that I disagree with them. I will not walk straight out of a meeting and tweet resign all over Twitter as soon as the meeting's finished. So I think there are ways to do things, of being loyal in public, but making it very clear. I suppose one example that's come up locally, and of course you and I both know about that, is the example of Kashmir, where clearly a lot of members, not only in Oxford, were a bit taken aback. Even though Keir Starmer didn't actually say anything different from what Ian Lavery said last November, it was still something that was, I think people did explain to him afterwards, the complexities of the situation and so on. But I'm hopeful that he has not been leader very long, and I'm hopeful that he is learning as well from members, and I will try and facilitate that. And I would also try and get much more money back to local parties. Since in 2018, the NEC promised to review membership. Now, the basic subscription is over £50. That's a lot of money, particularly with some people not having any income during the pandemic. So they were going to review that. They were also going to review the share that comes to local parties, because we can't fundraise at the moment. We still need money to campaign, to elect city councillors and county councillors, and it's time that system was reviewed. It was promised in 2018, so I would want to make sure that that was delivered.
Well, I'm sure that'll be music to many people's ears. We know that up and down the country, CLPs have been continue to face challenging times with fundraising, and we know that money's really needed. So yeah. So I'm going to ask you a big question, which is what's gone wrong on the NEC in the past years, in past 2 years in particular. So specifically, I'm talking about the leaks and, for want of a better term, the fun and games that occur. And so what's your reading of what's happened, and how do we fix things? How do we change and move things forward?
I think over the last, and this probably goes back to 2016, the Brexit referendum, which basically the result caused large parts of the movement to have a collective nervous breakdown. That includes the Parliamentary Party. And that's when it began to polarise. And a lot of it was not actually on policy. A lot of people were still on the left, but it polarised around personalities. You were either for the leader or against him. And NEC meetings became longer and longer. and fewer minds were changed. So it wasn't really very productive. Some of the meetings went on for 5, 6, 7 hours. You go in, and you might as well have had the vote at the beginning of the meeting before anyone had spoken, and it would have been the exact same. There was a democracy review, which I think again, well, actually every leader's had democracy review. Tony Blair had one, Gordon Brown had one, Ed Miliband had 2. Tom Watson did one, then we had Jeremy's great review, but it means all that time you're spending talking about who is represented on which committees. And we do need a healthy democracy in the party, but we also need to talk to voters. So it became quite polarised and votes were very split. And I don't think we were listening to each other. That was up until I left in 2018. Now, since 2018, I actually don't know what's going on really, and that's one of the reasons why, that's another reason why I'd like to be elected again, because I would like to find out what's going on, not from second-hand sources, the tabloid media and Twitter.
You want to go back to 7-hour meetings, do you, Anne?
It doesn't sound to me like it's very healthy. So the NEC it has people from all across the movement, from the unions, the socialist societies, councillors, Scotland, Wales, and everyone comes with their own experiences. What's true in Brighton isn't true in Bolsover, and it certainly isn't true in Scotland or Wales. So we need to start listening to each other and not immediately jump into I'm right and he's wrong or she's wrong. We need to listen to each other, respect where everyone's coming from and try and put things together. So I would have fewer votes and more sharing. And hopefully that will lead to more productive outcomes.
Let's hope so, Anne. So this is the £1,000,000 question then. How do we unite as a party? So you've gone through a timeline of leaders that you've served under, you've worked under for the greater good of the Labour Party, and we are where we are. And let's be honest, it's not always easy to be a member of the Labour Party, is it? I'm sure you'll be the first to admit that. So what do we do to bring unity to the party and to the movement?
Well, I think public loyalty is the first thing, and again that dates from 2016. It's wrong. It was wrong in 2016 after the referendum result for members to publicly undermine Jeremy, and I include MPs in that. But it's also wrong to undermine Keir Starmer now. And I have the feeling that some of the people who were very critical of the attacks on Jeremy in 2016, 2017, some of the same people were kind of calling on Keir Starmer to resign almost before he'd taken up the leadership. But I think that is changing, and people are basically tired of tearing chunks out of each other. We need to get together and move on. One of the things the NEC might do is to set an example. Local parties are, I've talked to members in a lot of local parties, and I don't want to kind of name names, but some of them have got a lot of infighting, which sometimes it's factional, sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's a mix, but all of it means that we're arguing with each other. We're not actually taking the arguments out to the people, and we're not taking them to our political opponents, whether they're Tories, Liberals or Greens. So if we can focus outward, as Joe Cox said, there's more in common than that which divides us, and it's a good motto. If the NEC started having meetings where everyone listened to everyone else with respect and didn't immediately try to find ways to prove they were wrong, if there were fewer votes and more looking for consensus where possible, it would set an example to the rest of the party, because you can't expect members at local level to behave if the NEC itself is not behaving in a mutually respectful way.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, so a final question I'm going to ask you, another big one. You've kind of alluded to some of it, but how do we win? How does Labour get back into power?
It's hugely challenging, and anyone who is looking at 2024, I think there are some very serious difficulties, but it is the thing that winning has kind of become a dirty word. The people who say, well, in 2017 and 2019, we won the argument. Well, excuse me, we won the argument, but that did not help the people who need a Labour government, the people who are on benefits, on universal credit, who are disabled, who are BAME people dying from COVID-19, who are out of work, who are trying to struggle on a pension, who can't get surgery, who can't get dental treatment, all of those. We can't do anything for those unless we're in government. There's a lot of discussion about the Green New Deal. Is Labour backtracking on its promise to be carbon neutral by 2030? Well, if we don't win in 2024, it will be 2030 before we even have a chance to do something about it. So we need to be outward focused, and how we win back both the traditional Labour seats in the old northern seats and the seats in southern university cities, I don't know. They're very different people, but in the end, we just have to have fixed principles. I believe that people respect that if they see Labour as a party that has consistent principles and not one which is trying to say one thing in half the country and something else in the other. What I don't have an answer to is Scotland. And things have been going wrong in Scotland for a long time. I was looking back, and while Gordon Brown was still Prime Minister, we lost the by-election in Glasgow East in 2008 to the SNP. And we never paid attention because it was a safe seat and we didn't do any work in safe seats. We've been losing ever since. But in Scotland, I wonder if it's almost a replay of the Brexit debate, where we're trying to appeal to nationalists and people who want to keep part of the UK. Now, the SNP obviously hoovers up the nationalists. The Tories are 100% pro keeping the union. So are we doing what we did with Leave and Remain? Are we trying to keep both sides happy at the same time? And I really do not have an answer to that. And I would want to talk to members in Scotland to find out about that. So it's challenging, and I would take it one step at a time. We have elections coming up in 2021, unless those are cancelled as well. We need to make advances in local elections in Scotland and in Wales. Every year up until 2024, we have to do better than we did before. So that's something I'd want to do. And I suppose the other thing is we were not prepared for the 2019 election. We didn't have a manifesto ready, and most of all, we didn't have candidates in place. So one of the priorities would be to get candidates in place, particularly in seats we hope to win early on. In 2017, members were begging for that, and for 2 years they were not allowed to choose candidates. So we ended up in the southeast and across the country with dozens of seats, but still didn't have a Labour candidate. Instead, we spent all the time running trigger ballots to see if we wanted to keep sitting MPs. So I spent a month doing a trigger ballot for the marvellous Annalise Dodds in Oxford East. And meanwhile, next door in Oxford West, they had a candidate imposed by the NEC again for the second time in 3 years against the wishes of the local party. And that's not on. So in very practical terms, I'd say that the NEC has to make sure that CLPs, local parties, are able to get candidates in place working in the community soon. And those candidates have to reflect all our diverse communities. We have all women shortlists. I would personally like to have all BAME shortlists as well, but again, we need to be in government to change the law. And we don't have good disabled representation, probably not LGBT plus, and that clearly needs work. So all of those things need looking at. It's not too soon to do the practical things. Policy, I think, will evolve over time. Maybe we need to set out some directions, but I'm also conscious that I would be coming back onto the NEC after 2 years away. A lot has happened in those 2 years. I'm not going to walk in the door and start laying down the law. The first meeting, I will just listen and see where we are and see what I can do constructively from there. So if there's anything else I haven't covered, feel free to
No,
ask.
I think you've covered a lot of ground there, Anne, as always. And I think your checklist is absolutely fantastic, which is focus. Let's stop talking in bubbles. You know, people with kind of like Labour, we have to talk to each other, but we've got to talk, and more importantly, we've got to listen to the people, be consistent, be principled, stand firm with our messaging, and focus on communities. And as you say, people are struggling like never before. This pandemic comes on the back of 10 plus years of austerity, have destroyed people, communities, cities, towns across this country, and it's absolutely devastating. As we know, because we are active members of our party, you know, we'd go on well, when we were able to go on the doorstep, we'd be hearing these stories every weekend, and it's devastating. So I just want to wrap up just by saying again that you are a formidable woman. You're looking for a big challenge, and you've got one. Anne. A lot of people will be running in the other direction from the NEC, but I genuinely wish you all the best. As I said, what I know about you is you're very fair, you're very principled, and you're very stubborn, but in a very good way. I've always found you to be very fair, and even those are people who don't agree with you, who don't like your politics, whatever their feelings are, I think they'd be hard pressed to find someone who works tirelessly for this party and, you know, to bring a Labour government into power, because we sure as heck need one. So thank you, Anne, and I wish you all the best.
Okay, sure. Are you